In the towering glass heart of the city, Samuel swept the same floors he'd walked for decades. Invisible to those who passed him, they saw only a janitor, never the man who had endured prejudice, betrayal, and battles they could not imagine. Day after day, whispers and cruel jokes chipped away at his dignity. Yet beneath the quiet eyes and worn gloves was a storm waiting to rise, and one arrogant man's growing disdain was about to shatter the silence. Morning light spilled through the vast glass windows of the Hawthorne Tower, painting streaks of gold across marble floors. Samuel moved silently down the corridor, mop in hand, his steps steady, practiced, almost meditative. For 23 years, he had walked these same halls, watching faces change while his presence remained unnoticed, like the air they breathed but never thanked. Morning. Samuel, murmured Linda from accounting. The only one who ever bothered to use his name. Most didn't. To them, he was just the janitor. As the elevators dinged and polished shoes clicked across the lobby, Samuel stepped aside. The young associates barely glanced at him. Some whispered jokes as they passed. Others wrinkled their noses if his cleaning cart happened to cross their path. He had learned long ago that their stares were heavier than the mop he carried. At 62, Samuel's back ached more than it once did, and the scars of a lifetime. Some physical, most not, still burned quietly beneath his skin. He remembered the first time someone called him a boy in this very building. He remembered being told he'd never rise above a broom. Yet here he was, decades later, still sweeping floors that weren't his mess. Hey, old man. A sharp voice broke the rhythm of his thoughts. Dylan, the operations manager. Mid-30s, always immaculately dressed, with a smile that never reached his eyes. You missed a spot. Then again, I guess perfection's a bit too much to expect from someone like you. A few employees nearby snickered. Samuel said nothing. He simply dipped his mop again, eyes fixed on the floor. Dylan thrived on humiliation, and silence robbed him of satisfaction. But Dylan wasn't done. You know, Samuel, they say hard work pays off. Guess that's not always true, huh? Still cleaning floors after all these years. Samuel lifted his gaze, just briefly, meeting Dylan's with calm, unreadable eyes. Inside something stirred. Not anger exactly, but the weary ache of a man who had carried dignity through storms most men would not survive. The day wore on, the tower buzzing with meetings and deals worth millions. Samuel continued his quiet work, absorbing the small cruelties like raindrops on stone. Yet deep within, beneath the uniform they mocked, the truth of who he was remained untouched, and though none of them could see it, the floor they walked on, the walls, the marble, even the towering glass, all of it was his, but Dylan was about to find that out the hard way. The top floor of Hawthorne Tower shimmered under a sea of chandeliers. The company's annual gala was in full swing. Laughter spilling from champagne glasses, deals whispered over plates of hors d'oeuvres, and music humming softly through the marble hall. For most, it was a night of celebration. For Samuel, it was just another night on the clock. He moved quietly between tables, collecting empty glasses, clearing spills with the precision of a man who had done this 1,000 times. He had been part of this company longer than most of the faces in the room. Yet here, among the polished suits and self-congratulation, he was invisible, until Dylan saw him. Ladies and gentlemen, Dylan's voice boomed through the mic as he stepped onto the stage, his grin wide, his tone theatrical. Before we toast to another year of success, let's acknowledge the real backbone of this company. The crowd turned. Samuel froze, a half-full tray in his hands. Samuel, Dylan called, his words dripping with mockery. Come here, my friend. Don't be shy. Every step Samuel took toward the stage felt heavier than the last. The room was a sea of eyes, some curious, some amused, a few already smirking. Look at him, Dylan said, draping an arm around Samuel's shoulder as if they were old friends. 30 years, folks. 30 years in this building, and still cleaning up after everyone else. Now that's dedication. Laughter rippled across the hall. Samuel's chest tightened. Tell me, Samuel, Dylan continued, voice now louder, crueler. Did you ever dream of being something more? Or was this always the height of your ambition? The room grew tense, but Dylan relished the silence. Samuel's lips parted, but no words came. He had endured humiliation before, but this was different. It was a spectacle. Well, Dylan sneered, stepping back. I think it's time we gave you the retirement you deserve. Effective immediately, Samuel. You're done here. Fired. Consider this your farewell party. The laughter returned, louder this time. Some looked away, uneasy, but no one spoke. Samuel stood there, the weight of decades pressing down on his shoulders. Rage and heartbreak swirled inside him, but he swallowed both. With slow, deliberate steps, he set the tray down, straightened his worn jacket, and walked toward the exit without a word. The laughter faded behind him. Only silence remained. But as Dylan basked in his petty victory, a truth far greater than his arrogance walked quietly out the door. And it was coming back for him. 3 days had passed since the gala. 3 days since Dylan's laughter had echoed through the marble halls while Samuel walked out in silence. He hadn't given the old janitor another thought. Men like Samuel didn't matter. They came and went, nameless and replaceable. That morning, Dylan strutted into the office, humming a tune, a spring in his step. "Big board meeting at 10, his assistant reminded him. "Urgent. All executives are required." "Probably some quarterly numbers," Dylan smirked, straightening his tie. "Time to show them why I'm indispensable." By 9:58, the top-floor conference room was filled with murmurs. Suits shuffled papers, screens flickered with charts, and the city skyline glowed behind the glass walls. But something felt different. There was a heaviness in the air, a quiet tension no one could name. Then Dylan stepped inside and froze. At the head of the long mahogany table, in the chair reserved for the company's most powerful voice, sat Samuel. No mop, no uniform, no bowed shoulders. He wore a charcoal suit, perfectly tailored, his posture tall and commanding. His hands rested calmly on the polished wood, as if they had always belonged there. Conversation died instantly. The room was silent, but for the sound of Dylan's own heartbeat pounding in his ears. "Mr. Samuel," the chairman greeted with deference. "We're ready when you are." Dylan blinked. "Mr. Samuel?" Samuel's eyes finally lifted, locking on Dylan's. No anger. No smirk, just quiet, immovable strength. "Please have a seat." "Mr. Dylan," he said evenly. Dylan sat, legs unsteady, his mouth suddenly dry. "As many of you already know," Samuel began, his voice deep and deliberate, "I've been a silent partner in this company for more than a decade. I own 40% of Hawthorne Industries and the very building we're sitting in." Gasps rippled through the room. Dylan felt his stomach twist. 40%? The janitor? "For years, I preferred to remain unseen," Samuel continued. "I wanted to understand this company from the ground up, including how it treats those at the bottom." His words were knives wrapped in silk, and every syllable cut through Dylan's chest. He shifted uncomfortably, remembering every insult, every sneer, every careless word. "And recently," Samuel added, his gaze never leaving Dylan, "I witnessed behavior that forces me to question the kind of leadership we value here." Dylan's palms grew clammy. The weight of the room pressed against him. He wanted to speak, to defend himself, but no words came. The man he'd humiliated now held his future in his hands. Samuel leaned back slightly, the silence stretching like a drawn bowstring. "The days of arrogance and cruelty in this building," he said softly, "are over." The air in the boardroom was so still, it felt like the walls themselves were listening. Dylan sat rigid in his chair, sweat collecting at his temple, the memory of his cruelty replaying in his mind. Just days ago, he had laughed as Samuel walked out humiliated. Now, that same man sat across from him, commanding the room without saying a word. Samuel let the silence linger. Then he spoke, softly at first. "I started here cleaning bathrooms," he said, his eyes drifting to the window as if seeing a younger version of himself in the reflection. 40 years ago, they told me a black man had no place in a building like this. They called me names I won't repeat. They made me invisible. And I let them, until I realized invisibility was my power. No one moved. No one dared interrupt. I worked 2 jobs. I saved every dollar. And one day, I bought the very floor they made me mop. Then another. And another." He paused, his gaze settling on Dylan. "Now I own this building. And part of this company." Dylan swallowed hard, his voice breaking through the heavy air. I didn't know." Samuel raised a hand. "That's the problem, Dylan. You never cared to know. You saw a uniform and assumed worth. You saw brown skin and thought you understood the story." Dylan looked down, shame burning hotter than fear. "You're right," he whispered. Samuel rose slowly from his chair and walked to the window, his hands clasped behind his back. "Do you know how many times I imagined this moment?" he asked quietly. "How many nights I dreamed of firing the men who spat on my dignity?" He turned, his eyes locking on Dylan's. "But here's the truth. Revenge changes nothing. It just turns you into the thing you hate." A tear slipped down Dylan's cheek. What happens to me now?" Samuel studied him for a long moment. The room held its breath. "That's up to you," he said finally. "I'm not firing you, but you will step down for 3 months. And in that time, you'll work alongside the people you think are beneath you. Cleaning, maintaining, serving. Maybe then you'll understand the strength it takes to stand where they stand. Dylan's shoulders shook as he nodded, the weight of humility crushing his pride. Thank you, he whispered. Samuel offered no smile, only a quiet nod. Don't thank me. Prove me right. The meeting adjourned in silence. Yet something profound lingered in the air. A shift, a reckoning, a second chance.